Hi, we are FX midterm group number 1, and this is our presentation. The main claim for our presentation is that we believe AI will achieve human-level consciousness at some point. So just as a refresher, consciousness within the scope of this presentation will be referred to as the sentience or awareness of internal and external existence. And one of the main sources for our arguments is the article "The Self as a Responding and Responsible Artifact" by Daniel C. Dennett. The presentation is broken up into 4 key parts. We're going to see how AI will achieve consciousness, or at least how we think it will. We will see how to deal with responsibility in the case of a conscious AI. We will also see some of the challenges that this problem faces and some objections to it.
So the first argument that we propose for AI to reach consciousness is an evolutionary one, and there can be observed an equal development of AI compared to the stages of human evolution that Dennett points out in his article. Therefore, we believe that it might be possible for AI to eventually reach consciousness. The evolution resulting in complex human beings started with species that only required situation action links for their needs, and those links can nowadays already be programmed in AI with simple if-then statements. And later on in evolution, species developed instinctive behaviors and acted based on trial and error. And this is also a stage AI can already use by implementing reinforcement learning. So after this stage, biological species became able to consider different actions and choose between them. We might be able to implement this strategy that's more efficient than trial and error in AI using the knowledge base that allows an AI to consider probability outcomes and consider different actions. The last stage of evolution that Dennett points out that makes human beings as complex as they are is the ability to communicate and use language. This is a stage that nowadays remains a challenge for AI because natural language is very hard to understand. But we believe that if natural language could be understood better, that there might be a point where AI can reach human level consciousness.
Our second claim is if AI can be held responsible. According to Wagner, illusory or not, conscious will is the person's guide to his or her own moral responsibility for action. And with this, he refers to the fact that you are responsible if you have done it, if you caused the action or are in control over the action, and if you are aware of what you are doing. So this indicates that AI would be held responsible for the actions if it has consciousness. However, the kind of penalty or consequence for conscious AI should still be investigated, as it is possible to modify the phenomenal self model, which breaks the first person self and therefore the ability to experience suffering. So there needs to be an appropriate penalty for this. There can, however, be no doubt that we, as the potential creators of conscious AI, are partially responsible for the machines that we create. But further development should arise in order to decide when AI will be responsible.
The third claim is, will AI achieve consciousness or not? The challenge is defining the consciousness is still debatable. According to Cambridge University College Dictionary, consciousness is the state of understanding and realizing something. But according to Gazanica, when we speak of consciousness, we often think about awareness. But in neuroscientists use the word clinically. Consciousness refers to the state of arousal or attentiveness. For example, when we see the picture of an ice cream, our brain might arouse or activate neurons that fire chemicals that help us to taste or the ice cream, which hardly can be expressed by AI. Even though the AI is built with a complex neural network, they are still missing the biological and chemical composition of a brain. This is difficult to model our brain or program our life experience to an AI. The neurons in our body might be affected by natural cause or hereditary or aging or sickness, which might be not experienced by an AI. John Searle also argues that there is no evidence has been found for providing the machine is capable of duplicating human thinking. It's also never been able to understand thinking or level of human abstraction. An AI may more and more in improvement in developing an AI in self-consciousness. Some can identify themselves as between other AIs, and they can help us to explain the weather in in a certain day, sometimes may surpass the human capability, but cannot overwhelm the human overall. There is more and more need to learn about the steps should be taken in building an AI just to fully imitate the human brain in the near future. Based on the technological advancement, it's possible that AI can achieve a level of consciousness, but not definitely in the near future.
Naturally, there's a lot of criticism against AI ever reaching consciousness, and there's some various good objections to that. For the one part, as we saw in the paper, for example, Libet's evidence for the so-called readiness potential and the whole idea that decision-making is already predetermined, therefore consciousness is merely an illusion. However, we saw later in the same paper how this argument can be easily refuted. Another one, for example, is the idea, the term called carbon chauvinism, as briefly described by Samuel, which is essentially the idea that only carbon-based life has the potential to create the necessary sophisticated connections so that intelligent behavior can arise from it. But we now know that silicon has even greater potential. It creates better and stronger bonds than carbon. So it's not hard to imagine life outside carbon spectrum. Another argument against that is that AI lacks the necessary language and the capability of self-monitoring and self-representation. But the same way human consciousness arose with a giant leap out of animal consciousness, it's safe to believe that maybe AI will do the same. And on overall, we think that with the tempo that AI is progressing, this is in fact inevitable. Thank you for your attention.
Oh,